was, and I passed House Bill 4009 in the Texas legislature. Rick Perry signed it into law that put together a system where colleges, where churches, where government officials, other not NGOs, non-governmental organizations could work together, have a website where they could all stay tuned and lock together on what's the best practice, what are we looking for, what do we need.
Hi. Tonight on the special candidate edition of the A-List by Angie Mertens, we're stepping into the heart of American power and policy. I'm sorry that I have to read notes. Can't read my teleprompter tonight. I had a surgery on my eye, so forgive my reading. But it's not every day that we have the privilege of sitting down with someone who helped shape the direction of our nation. Tonight, we are joined by Congressman Randy Weber of Texas, a senior voice in the United States House of Representatives, and a lawmaker with direct influence over the decisions impacting millions of Americans. At a time when the country feels deeply divided, when headlines are louder than conversations, and controversy seems to dominate the national mood, many Americans are asking serious, burning questions about leadership, accountability, and the future of our democracy. Supporters argue that our government is being run effectively and that strong leadership is steering the nation forward. Others believe that cracks are widening and that the system is under strain. Tonight, we won't shy away from those conversations. Texas Congressional District 14 serves the portions of Brazoria County, Galveston, Jefferson, and Orange County?
That's right.
Is that everything?
That's right.
All right. So we want to thank you so much, Congressman Weber, for joining us. I'm Angie Mertens, and this is the A-List. So let's start off by just tell us a little bit about you, your family, your background,
Sure.
and let's just face it. Let's discuss how you possibly got that fabulous wife of yours to marry you. I mean, that's the burning question.
Well, I was slicker than a mud flap, as we say in Texas. Well, thank you for that. You know, I've grown up in a 20-mile radius, 72 years. I was born on the north side of Pearland, and of course, I met Brenda Gill, who was born over in Nederland, that's Jefferson County. Right, and she moved over here when she was 18 years old in 1974. Her dad got a job at a Texas City refinery, and I was going to Alvin Junior College part-time, working with my parents' RV business, and she showed up in the cafeteria one day, and I told the guys we were playing spades, I said, look at those ladies over there, you know. Watched her for about 15 minutes. She got up to leave, and I said, hey. And she stopped by the table, and she said, yeah. I said, what's your name? She said, Brenda Smith, and I said, come on, what's your real name?
Thought she was lying about that.
Brenda Smith. I said, Brenda Smith, how about a date Friday night? Took her out. We had went to a pizza place, cracked a bunch of corny jokes. She told her best friend Martha, she said, that guy thinks he's so funny. When he calls me back next week for another date, I'm going to turn him down flat. You know what the problem was, Angie? What? I knew that was her attitude. I didn't call her back. She told Martha, he didn't call me for another date. What's wrong with this guy? 2 weeks goes by. She told Martha, he didn't call me again. Who is this guy? 2 weeks goes to 3 weeks. You know what happened?
She called you?
She called me.
Brenda.
So we've been together 51 years. This coming November the 6th. And I say that non-dating 3-week period was the longest in my life. That's how we met. And we've got, as you know, 3 kids, 8 grandkids, and 2 great-granddaughters.
Oh,
she taught 4th grade 27 years there in Pearland, and I ran Weber's Air Conditioning and Heating in the Pearland, Friendswood, Lamar, Clear Creek area, and even up into Houston, Alvin, Santa Fe. We had a pretty good following there for 35 years. Sold it in 2017. So small business owner, you betcha. Got into politics in '83 when Reagan ran for re-election. I said, I'm going to work for him. He believes in America. I'm going to work for him. Became a precinct chair, election clerk, election judge, and I've been a Republican ever since.
So you were a city councilman first?
Yes. Well, no. Actually, in 1990, I was a precinct. I started in the Republican Party. I knocked on doors in 1984 for Ronald Reagan's reelection, and a guy by the name of Tom DeLay.
Wow.
Absolutely. That's how I got started in politics. And then they said to me, Randy, you're a business owner. You know, you're a church leader, or you've lived in this area all your life, you ought to get into politics, run for city council. And so in 1990, I was elected to Pearland City Council for 6 years. Yeah, yeah.
And you were House of Representatives.
Well, I actually, this is more than you bargained for. So then our county commissioner was retiring, so I said, I'll run for that. I spent $7,000. A state rep ran against me, and he spent $70,000, and he beat me. So I said, well, maybe that was a little high ambition for run against the state rep. So I was going to run for drainage district commissioner against very popular. The next 2-year cycle, he beat me. We spent $5,500. And I said, well, I don't think they want me around here, you know. So then our state rep, Glenda Dawson, died in office in 2006. I said, I'll run for that. We spent $70,000 of our money, and I lost. And there was 3 losses in a row. And so I said, oh, man.
I feel your pain, Randy.
I said, oh, yeah. I said, oh, I can't keep doing this. Well, the guy that beat me, it was only their one term, and he wasn't going to run another term. And so the speaker's office, Tom Craddock's office in Austin, called and said, and I'll tell you who called me in just a minute. They called and said, we want you to run again. I said, I can't keep spending that kind of money. My wife's going to kill me. They said, well, would you at least think about it? I said, oh, let me think about it, you know. Then I got a phone call for one guy. Was it June the 30th, I think? Dr. Robin Armstrong, who was very instrumental in Republican Party politics, and still is, by the way, called me and said, Speaker's office has been talking to you. What are you thinking? I said, man, Robin, June the 30th, 2006. I was playing dominoes with some neighbors, me and Brenda. I said, let me talk to Brenda Gill about this, because unless she's 100% on board, I can't do this. And so we talked, we prayed, and we said, okay, we will do this. We will absolutely do this. So we got elected in 2000. Actually, it was November 2008. So I was there 2009 through 2012. And then my chief of staff called and said, she called me July 26, 2011. And she said, have you heard the news about Ron Paul? And I said, you know how you go first? I went,
right.
No, what happened to him? She said, oh, no, he's fine. He's retiring. And I said, oh. Our districts overlapped, his congressional district and my state house district. And I said, oh, good for him. And she said, well, and I'm like, well, what? She said, people are calling up here and saying you need to run. And I said, for Congress? I said, Cara, do I look like I've lost my mind? Because, you know, with Brenda teaching school, she's out in the summer. American News Company ran itself. So we could get in our travel trailer, take the grandkids, we could go all over the state of Texas. I said, I am not running for Congress. George H.W. Bush moment. Read my lips. I'm not running for Congress. Remember that? She said, well, you need to think about it. I said, we'll think about it. She was coming in for a human trafficking seminar. I passed a bill, House 4009, against human trafficking from Mexico, of all things, most of it. Anyway, I said, come on into town. We'll talk to the district director. We'll talk to Brenda. We'll talk to her husband. We'll talk about it. So we sat there and we had dinner in Pearland at the Italian restaurant, and we left, and Brenda said, do you think this is something God might want you to do? And I said, gosh, I don't know. You know, what do you think? And she said, well, we got to talk to our consultant. You know, we got to pray about this. And we did. And we said, okay, if we raise, let's say we raise $100,000 of money, I said, that's as far as it goes. If we run out of money, we run out of money. So that's, you know what? We wouldn't be the first candidate to drop out due to lack of funds. So I said, okay, we'll agree. We'll run, see how much we can raise, and we'll do this thing. Well, we wound up raising the $100,000, but we found out we needed a lot more. So you ready for this? We put $225,600 of our own money in the campaign.
That you weren't going to do.
That I wasn't going to do. Now, we finally, we still actually have a debt owed on ourselves in our campaign. Little by little, of course, we paid ourselves back. But that's how I got into Congress. You'd think I'd had better sense.
And you've been congressman for 13 years
13 years, yeah.
So,
by the way, we got elected on November the 6th, 2013. That was our 30th, what would that have been, 33rd anniversary, I guess. 20.
And you're about to have
November
your
the
50th
6th, 2013. Yeah, because we got married. That's right. We have 50th this November coming up.
Well,
So
congratulations.
thank you.
All right. So we'll think back to that first day
Mm-hmm.
when you were in Congress, all the goals and the dreams and the
Right.
hopes that you had.
Right.
When you look back over those 13 years so far, what is the one moment that you're the most proud you were able to either put through or
Well, it's some of the legislation that we've put through, and people don't get. Let me describe our district a little bit more in detail than I have in detail. You know, we have 7 ports, Angie. You've heard me say that more than any other member of Congress. Some have 4. We have 7. Now, in full disclosure, we're going to lose the port of Freeport in redistricting, so I will only have 6. But the close everybody, some have 4 ports. We still have 6 or 7. Okay, and so what I've been doing is building up Texas, saying, look, we're ports, we're energy, we're trade, we're doing everything we can. So I go around the country and I meet with other reps who are running for office, and we have what's called field hearings, and I describe exactly what a great part the state of Texas plays in this thing that we call the United States, because again, 7 ports, we produce 65% of the nation's jet fuel, 35% of the nation's gasoline, 80% of the nation's military-grade fuel, and 60% of the strategic petroleum reserve is in our district. So for us, energy is a huge, huge, huge deal. Texas plays a huge part in this. I think part of the problem, one of the things that I was very, very proud to be part of, is the fact that Trump shut down the border. You know what? He literally shut down the border because we had, as I've already described when we were talking earlier, you had coyotes bringing young girls up here and raping them and hanging their clothes in trees as a trophy. And then you had people bringing fentanyl. You remember this, at a point in time, we were losing 100,000 Americans a year to fentanyl. Well, we've stopped that. One of the things that we worked on with President Trump is that you got to give the Texas legislature credit. I kind of miss the Texas legislature because they don't have any kind of debt, right? No debt. They're not working like the federal government where they just have so much debt it's unbelievable. Texas spent $13 billion with the B dollars on the border, securing the border, and the Texas delegation got together and we said, okay, federal government, we need to reimburse Texas. We pulled that off, so that was in the one big beautiful bill. You betcha. So I'm glad that I represent Texans and that I can tell people how important Texas is to our country.
well, I mean, you represent Texas and we have a border. We have some big issues, so let's just dive right on into immigration.
You bet.
So I'm sure people in Washington look towards you for insight into the issues of immigration.
Right.
What's working here in Texas? What isn't?
You mean in terms of immigration?
Immigration, yeah.
Well, of course, we all want, as I said earlier, I don't know if I started, did I say we started from Germany? Was that when we were just getting started?
It's bad when you do a pre-interview, right?
I know. But, to our listeners, our viewers and whatnot, we so appreciate y'all doing this. And by the way, A-List is a really good name because I'm on A-List with Southwest Airlines.
Which is how you get up to Washington, huh?
Absolutely.
Well, you want to land on the A-list of everybody's voters.
Well, that's
record,
exactly right. But absolutely, we work toward. We want to make sure that people can come here legally. People sometimes want to kind of ding me and say, "Well, Weber, you just don't like immigration because you want the border secured." And I said, "No, that's not true. I wouldn't even be here if it wasn't for immigration. My grandfather came over on the boat from Germany. They went to Ellis Island. We have a copy of the manifesto. We did the 23andMe stuff or all the Ancestry.com stuff. Actually, I shouldn't say that. My aunt did it, but she's she got me started in it. And then my grandmother, as we discussed earlier, her whole family came over through Texas and settled in Texas, 1845.
Right here at the great port of
That's
Galveston.
right through the port of Galveston. And by the way, do you know who built the port of Galveston and when it was built? It was built in 1825 by the Mexican government because Texas was still a territory, if you will, of Mexico. And so Galveston, I got to give the chamber, Gina Spagnola and her a shout out because it is a super chamber, oldest chamber of commerce in the state of Texas. We have the oldest newspaper in the state of Texas. Okay. And now you talk about the port being one of the oldest ports of the state of Texas. I forget what down completely south was. But a lot of energy comes from Texas. We want people to come to Texas. We want immigrants in here. I own an air conditioning company, for 35 years we talked about. And so we had some fellows that were Hispanics. And by the way, I studied Spanish in high school. I didn't learn it because I was playing around too much. But my dad in his RV business, I worked for him part-time while I was in school and college. He had two guys from Mexico. And as I say, two trabajadores de Mexico hablan nada de español. Entonces yo aprendí español. Translating, those were two guys that spoke nothing but Spanish. And I learned Spanish then. Did you know that I learned all the bad words first?
Well, of course.
I knew exactly what to say, not if, but when you hit your thumb with a hammer. I won't repeat that here.
You can do the string
but we need those kind. We need people coming in and working with America. We just have to have a better, safe, secure, succinct system. We know who's here, and we know what they're going to do. And by the way, they need to help pay a little bit of that part of the cost or expense of coming in, and so. Otherwise, Americans are going to bear the cost for all kinds of things: more courts, more lawyers, more judges, more clerks, more utilities, air conditioning, electricity, so on and so forth. And so you just have to ask yourself the question: why should Americans, even though we've cut taxes now, we've cut taxes almost $4,000 a family, depends on what the figures you're using. But why should Americans have to pay to bring people in? It doesn't make sense. Okay.
So you're saying they should pay like a fine or fee, not a
Well,
fine,
I wouldn't
a
call-
fee
right?
to come in?
Well, and here's the thing: we want them to go through their embassies. The law is that there's 3 reasons why people can seek asylum in the United States. Number 1, they're persecuted as a group. Number 2, they're persecuted because of their religion, or they're persecuted because of their group religion and their sexuality. I guess you know what I'm saying. But the thing is, you don't come into the country anywhere, Texas or others, illegally and say, I need to talk to somebody. You go to the embassy in the country you live in, because if you want to claim that you're in fear of your life because the Mexican drug lords are threatening to kill you, then you go to that embassy in Guatemala or wherever it might be, Honduras, whatever, some of those countries, or Mexico, and you let them look at you, and those who knows the state, knows the community, and make a decision. Is that a credible threat? And if it is, then there can be a process sent to send them north in the United States. Because they learned early on, Angie, that one of the things they could do is they just say, I'm in fear of my life. From who? Who you in fear from? Is it your mother-in-law?
You and mother-in-laws.
And so, there needs to be a system to do that. But unfortunately, you got to remember something. President Trump inherited that from Obama and from Biden. I call him Biden because I think he's Obama's 3rd term. President Trump inherited that, and he was about building the wall for a long time, about making it clear that we are not going to have business as usual where people can just come flooding. And you know this too, when they come over here, Angie, and your heart goes out to these families, and they have, if it's a pregnant mom who gives birth, as she crosses, they're going to need hospitalization. There's going to be county hospitals. There's going to be emergency rooms. And our great physicians, our great nurses in that industry do no harm. The oath that they take. They're going to treat those people. And guess what happens to the price of our medical care? Up it goes. So you have to take all that into consideration when you talk about the immigration problem.
Well, and I think that you specifically, because you represent Texas, we have a border here. There's lots of people that are north of us, east and west, that don't have a border that's being crossed.
Sure.
And we have a lot of humanitarian efforts that help the immigrants when they get here. But you were very emotional a minute ago, telling me one reason. A lot of people think you're pretty hard, Randy, pretty hard on immigration.
Right.
You can speak very toughly about it. And Houston is the #1 human trafficking port in America.
Texas, that's one of the records Texas has. And I passed House Bill 4009 in the Texas legislature. Rick Perry signed it into law that put together a system where colleges, where churches, where government officials, other not NGOs, non-governmental organizations could work together have a website where they can all stay tuned and lock together on what's the best practice, what are we looking for, what do we need, those kinds of things. So that's a record that we don't like. Texas is the #1 state for human trafficking in the country. It's not a good place to be.
No, and Houston's right here, our neighbor to the north, and what a horrible statistic. But that's what we want to stop. We want to stop that at the border.
That's right.
Stop the human trafficking. Stop the drugs.
Yeah.
I had the candidates for district attorney here the other day, and we were saying that, most people don't have a clue. They don't ever have to go to court. They don't know anything about the jail system. They never talk to a district attorney.
Right.
But unfortunately, a lot of loved ones and families do have drug problems.
Yeah.
And if we could stop the drugs coming over,
Right.
we can work on that issue of the drug problems that we
and
have
the human
here.
trafficking as well.
Of course, yeah.
Right. There's the Polaris Project, and I'm going to forget now. I think the number is 800-373. What is it? 837. It's 800-3737. Look up the Polaris Project, because if you see something, and you see this in airplanes, in the bathrooms, you've seen that sticker.
That's
right.
If you're
It's in
being
Spanish.
trafficked,
It's in
yeah.
English and Spanish, and you call this number. And so that we're instrumental in making sure that we want to stop that. The drugs and the human trafficking. They're trafficking these young girls. I would think people would be in an outrage about these illegals coming across from the south, violating those young girls just to get them here. And it's just, it's a real catch-22 for us, because we want the workers here. We want people, I'm not against immigration. Do it legally, just like my folks did. So, but unfortunately, it got way out of hand.
And it's hard because it's an emotional issue
It very much
for
is.
so many people. But I like that we do have some things that you're saying could help people. But do you expect there to be a road of return for all of these people that have been
I don't know. I'm
deported?
just remembering, Angie, before I answer that. I've been down the border like 10 or 12 times, and I'll never forget the next to last time I was there. There was a Portuguese family from Brazil. They speak Portuguese, but they speak Spanish too, and I speak some Spanish, obviously. And it was a husband and wife, and they had a child that was probably 6 years old, a boy, and he was so afraid, and she was afraid. So I spoke to him in Spanish. It's going to be okay. They were on our side. I said, somebody will come along and they will assist you. I said, you don't have to worry about it. Back now, that was before Trump started closing things down. Actually, that wasn't my 10th time out of the 12. It was probably my 7th or 8th time. I think President Biden was still in office. But my heart went out to them, because they were afraid. The husband was trying to be, making her feel better, and the little boy feel better. And I knew that they were in a lot of pain, and I was trying to make them feel better, because here's a Texan. Of course, they probably wouldn't have known what a Texan was. But here's an American or a congressman or an elected official saying, it's going to be okay. Somebody will come by and they will get you. They weren't drug runners, you know what I'm saying? They weren't rapists. Yeah. And those are the kinds of people your heart goes out to. Yeah, I'm sorry, keep going. I just remember that.
Well, I'll go on for immigration for a minute. So you are the Trumpiest Trump fan that I know. No.
Well, I have his endorsement. Well, no, you've missed something. You've missed something, Angie. We'd go to an event where President Trump is, me and my beautiful bride, and he'd say, Brenda Gill, well, come on, you want to let's do a picture. And I'd say, Mr. President, can I get in that picture too?
Well, you have to know. You have a beautiful wife.
Absolutely.
So you're a man of faith.
Mm-hmm.
I know you personally. I know your family. And I've never known a man with more love, more humor, and joy around you. In fact, if you see this man at the polls, he's not talking policy with you. He's just telling jokes,
Well, I'm trying to lift up the name of Jesus Christ, too. Yeah.
But you also have a tough side. We see that sometimes.
Sure.
You can be abrasive if it's an issue that you want to push.
Right.
DEI, immigration. You've had some zingers.
Sure.
And But Congressman, you've spoken very personally about President Trump as a man of faith and someone you believe genuinely cares about the country.
Right.
At the same time, many Americans, even some who greatly support his policies, struggle with his public persona.
Right.
The bravado, the sharp rhetoric, what sometimes people perceive as bullying.
Right.
For viewers who have a hard time reconciling those two images, what can you tell us about the man behind the persona that the public doesn't usually see?
Well, that's a great question. I've ridden 4 times in the Beast with the president, right? And as I said, he loves when we're at event stuff to get his picture made. And we've got pictures of all of us with him and stuff like that. We've met him the tarmac over at Ellington Airfield. He's coming on Air Force One when he's coming into the area. He's got a tough side. He's got a human side too, believe it or not. Just remember that in the general election where he was reelected this time, 210,320 Texans in the 14th district of Texas voted for him. 210,000. Now you say, well, what does that work? Well, we're about 750,000 constituents. And that's not voters. That's 750,000 people in the district. So when you've got over 1/3 voting for him, they want what he's been promising. They want him to be strong and tough with these countries. Now, I've seen the human side of him. And you may have done this, and I have not done this. Have you read his book, The Art of the Deal? Have you read that book?
Yes.
See, I haven't. And I'm told on that book, boy, he says, you just go out there and you go after everything and you push on them and you just push out, you just all those kinds of, you just do a number on them. I'm paraphrasing. Well, I'm having to guess. I think he probably does that. And then what he does, then as whoever he's just deemed starts going, all of a sudden he starts slowing, rolling them back. He's an entrepreneur, and boy, he can negotiate. He's probably, I would guess most people would say this, whether or not you like his tactic, he's probably the hardest negotiator that I've ever seen. So especially when he does that with other countries, whether it's tariffs, whether it's he's ended some wars between countries by saying you will not. Basically, the American economy, we're the largest market in the world. And if you've got 2 countries that are warring against each other and they've been selling goods to America, and he's done this, he shut them down. He said, y'all either stop it or you lose access to the American market. Well, guess what they did? They stopped
it.
Yes, sir. Yes, ma'am. I mean, yeah.
It's hard to tell. So still people believe in his
Make America Great Again.
Right. But maybe not how his tactics are. And I think that when people hear you just always, you don't have a conversation that Trump is not a part of, and that's respectful for the president. Sure. I really think that both sides, when, even when it's our opposing president, should still be respectful to the office of president. But it's hard when you feel like you don't agree with him, but I've heard you say great things about him.
Sure.
So
I've been in the same room with President Biden in the White House. They had an event for an athlete she was a female athlete from over in the Beaumont area. Her name escapes me right now. She was a better golfer. I'd have to pull up her name and stuff. I have so many names in my little tiny pea brain. But she was a Democrat. Beaumont was a lot of Democrats way back in the day. I'll wake up by 2:00 in this morning. I'll text you. But no, when I'm around President Biden, but his policy, you're probably going to hear me make fun of it, criticize it, call it whatever you want. You'll never hear me cuss him, but you will hear me say rough. Some people think it's hard to hear. Boy, you just don't care about those people. You don't care about that policy. You don't care about whatever. No, there's a way that this has to happen. I care about tech. I care about Jesus and God. I care about my family. I care about this 14th district. I care about Texas, and those are what we focus on. And so, President Trump's got his own way, but like I just pointed out, with 1/3 of the Texans in this district voting for that, they believe in him.
So while we've got the Christian value thing up, so what about DEI? You're you're also you and most all Republicans are staunchly opposed to having to make accommodations
For diversity, equity,
DEI.
and inclusion. There's no reason that we need to set aside a program that says we're going to make sure certain people get certain privileges. Look, we're all Americans first, right? Or maybe I should say we're all Americans, Texas first. I was born in Texas, as you can't tell. In case you can't tell, I'm a Texan. And you can always tell a Texan. You just can't tell him much. But so they don't think government programs should be instituting that. If you knew what some of the NGOs, Angie, when we looked I'm on the Energy and Commerce Committee, when we looked at reconciliation in the big beautiful bill, if the American public knew what some of those NGOs and some of those programs, DEI and others, were aimed at, the amount of money that was spent and that was shoveled out the door, and I said I respect President Biden because of his position. I don't know about the auto pen. We don't know who was doing all that the last several months, but we've identified the last, I don't know, what was it? I don't know, 26, 36 days or whatever, month and a half, let's just say, that they were in office. They were shoveling out as much money, pushing money out to non-government organizations as much as they could get out the door as fast as they could. We still to this day don't know who was using the auto pen to sign. They're going to probably investigate that, because if it wasn't President Biden himself, somebody violated federal law by forging a transcript. Does that make sense?
So why haven't we investigated yet? I mean, we're working on the second year of.
This is the kind of stuff that we talk about. What's called a SCIF, Secured Classified Information Facility, SCIF. So there's a lot of details, and this came out when Jim Comey talked about the FBI, and then Hillary Clinton, had a bunch of classified documents. And think about how ironic that was, that when Trump got elected, they went after him. So I like to tell people in the 10 years preceding that, Joe Biden had classified, he was vice president. He had classified documents in his Stingray or Corvette or whatever it was in his garage, right? You had classified documents. Hillary Clinton had 120 something emails on her computer classified. Jim Comey said that no prosecutor would take that charge. I don't know if you remember that. And then you had 3 people that ran for president, and then Donald Trump had classified documents. But only one was subpoenaed and filed on. Donald Trump. In police work, they called that a clue. So you had agencies who were literally trying to uphold the Obama administration, hope that Hillary got into it, hope that Biden could do it, but they didn't like Trump, so they went after Trump because they raided him, and you know this, in Mar-a-Lago in February, FBI did, because he had classified documents. He's the president of the United States. He has the purview of any classified document. You know what I'm saying? So anyway, a little bit of a sidestep.
A little sidestep.
Yep.
So, I think that, there's lots of DEI things that we have no idea. I know that there was a lot of things we read about that, things where they were asking for money for certain things but the most things that people look at are accommodations for things like jobs and
Sure.
and I think that most people agree, whether we morally object to someone's lifestyle, that they shouldn't be you shouldn't decide whether or not they could have a job because of that or not, but that you have to hire a certain amount of people and
they give them a quota, if you will.
right.
But we mustn't forget this. Going way back, we've already talked about my background. My grandmother's family, 1845. My great-grandfather's family, 1903, came over from Germany. Both of them, they were born, or they were from the areas of Germany, probably about 75 miles apart. It was kind of cool the way they got together. Yeah. And they had 5 German boys. I had 4 German uncles, no daughters. But anyway, so you see that back in the early 1900s, if you look back, let's go back even further than that. In the way before, slaves were treated bad, right? Blacks were treated bad, right? And so you had laws coming. It cost Lincoln his life. Lincoln is President Reagan was always my hero. That's how I got into politics. And Lincoln was number 2 because of what he did. It cost him his life. You know what I mean? He got shot and killed and died taxed April 15th, 1865. He got shot in Ford's Theater, was carried across the house across the street, and died the next morning at 7:22 a.m. I think was the time. And one of the people standing there, I forget what his name was, said, "There lies one of the greatest governors of men that has ever lived," basically. And so, even then, you could argue we needed quotas and stuff because there was so much racism. There was so much. They were against. In New York, they didn't like Italians. They didn't like Catholics. They didn't like Jews, obviously. Even then, they didn't like Hispanics. So this is not something DEI didn't just crop up since President Obama got in 2008. It's been around for a long time. And so it's education. You want to teach your kids? Well, first of all, I'd say it's about being Christian because God made us all. You know what I mean? Made us all. Are you going to do everything I think you should? No. Am I going to do everything that you think I should? No. Everything my wife thinks I should, I will do. So, this is the kind of thing that you say, sure, I understand that, but I don't want my kids or my grandkids learning some of those things that we would say are outside the realm of Christianity. And let's face it, if you read God's word, there's some of them that are outside that realm. So
But then Jesus hung out with them.
He did.
He would have loved them and hung out with them.
And still does.
He wouldn't bring them to heaven with them, though.
Well, he still does love them. You know what I mean? And when he comes back, everybody who's confessed faith in him and turned to him, he will be taken back to heaven.
So now, this is your interview, but I have to say, I think that the world should be run like the show The Voice. So everybody's facing backward. If you're doing
I don't know if I've seen that show.
So all of the judges face backward, and a singer comes out and performs, and they judge them by just their voice, not what they look like,
sure.
And so, if they're doing a job interview, I think it should be, they're asking the questions, they're getting best candidate, the best person.
You can tell I don't watch TV.
Yeah. And truthfully, I don't watch that, but if they were, deciding on a particular job, you're getting the best person for the job,
right?
Because they say, there's all kinds of prejudices. Sometimes beautiful people get jobs that they don't deserve because of the way they look. People have a different kind of prejudice for that. The physical. You'll see them and you're like, oh, wow, they're smart, or they're good, or the man, he's got a good presence, so he must be powerful. That's so when you can't see them, you decide on their merit.
Yeah, they're there for the voice, and so
and then you turn around, and then you can see.
I'm glad you clarified that, because when you said that, I was thinking The View.
The one, no.
Nobody should be in that view, or that's the wrong view. I'm not sure exactly what.
No, The Voice. Yeah, so not by looking at somebody, by judging only on their merit.
Yeah.
So making quotas is also difficult because nobody should be judged, because of any way that they appear, their color,
What did Kennedy say? He longed for the day when people were, not Martin Luther King, that his kids were judged by their character, not the color of their skin, and it cost him his life. There's another good example, Great American.
So, let's see. That's what I just said. What accomplishments from your recent term are you most proud of, and why does it matter to people back home?
Well, you've already heard me say 210,000 Texans voted for the Republican agenda, the Trump agenda, if you will. And you've already heard me talk about how important our District 14 is, in not just to Texas, but remember, we send LPG, we send LNG over the seas. When President Biden shut down the LNG permits, boy, that was a problem, right? Because we want to be able to sell LNG. But I have filed 14 bills in Congress. I could go through them all. A lot of them have to do with energy. One that I loved, that I filed, that I couldn't get a hearing on because I guess it was too controversial, was the School Resource Officer Reform Act. John Barnes was an officer. Let me back up. It was 20. You know me, I'm a campaigner, as you already pointed out. I love shaking people's hands, standing at early voting, and we used to have early voting at the 174th, the Calder, the Annex. Of course, since they've redone it, no more early voting, right? You know that. And so I stood there every 2 years. I'd go early voting. I'd go early voting in the spring. I'd go early voting in the fall. So I was there when one of our volunteers was helping, and she got a phone call. She said, "Oh my gosh, I just got a word that there's a shooting at Santa Fe High School." Okay, this was February at early voting. Okay, and so I said, "Go, go, go, go." Well, it was the boy that cried wolf, you know. So that it didn't happen. She comes back. I said, "Oh, thank the Lord, thank goodness, thank God, thank goodness, thank goodness." Fast forward to May the 18th, when the voting day was now upon us. Okay, or I forget where was I? I guess that that was 2018. Oh, I was in May. That's right. I was in D.C. It wasn't during voting time. It was Friday, May the 18th, and my chief of staff, Cara, called. I was on my way in. Cara called me on my phone in the car, and she said, "Did you hear the report of a shooter in Santa Fe High School?" What am I thinking? Yeah. Well, turned out it was true. 10 people lost their lives. Brenda was friends with one of the school teachers, and so you had 8 students and 2 teachers lose their lives. 2 weeks later, I think it was, I came in on Saturday, or was it the next Saturday? It was that very next Saturday, because I told my staff, our staff, y'all staff, because we work for y'all. I said, "Get me out of here, get me down to Texas." And so we flew as quickly as we could. We got there as quickly, and of course there was news networks all over the place. They wouldn't let us. Obviously, it was a crime scene, and I mean, it was just so much confusion and angst and pain and fear and stuff that we couldn't see much. The next Saturday, was it? I think Larry Taylor, right? Greg Bonin, Randy Weber, state senator, state rep, and of course member of Congress, got to go through and tour that hallway, and a bunch of bullet marks and stuff like that was gone. The tiles were gone. The doors were taken by the FBI. We saw the rooms where this person was killed and this person was killed. And this is what I call the John Barnes Act, because John Barnes Act was a school resource officer there when it happened. And I talked to the president of the school board right after it happened, and the superintendent of the school district. They told us that John was in the office, John Barnes, talking to the superintendent, and the fire alarm went off. And they said that day. And so she said, "Oh, superintendent told John Barnes that, hey, somebody has pulled a fire alarm again, student." Well, the closer he got to that building, he could hear the shots. So he comes down the hall, and he could hear the shots in the hallway. And I think they call it triact or tri-sitting. And he comes around the corner with his arm extended with a gun to be able to take out the perpetrator. The alleged perpetrator had a shotgun, and he just eviscerated John's arm. Down he went, of course. And then it took a couple of very brave police officers to pull John out to safety. And so we have what we call the first time the John Barnes Act, and it says, look, he should be given money, and he should be given his reimbursement for the rest of his life, because he was acting to save kids, And right now we've not been able to get that bill. This would be like the 3rd time I filed it. We've not been able to get that bill to have a hearing in the appropriate committee, and which probably be the Judiciary Committee, because it would become a law, and then get it, with our Democratic friends' help, to get it to the floor so that we can see if we can't pass this bill. I'm still pushing for that. That's the bill I'm pushing for. Bring the space shuttle home. John Cornyn and I filed a bill. For Pete's sakes, even though Johnson Space Center is not physically in my district, it's half a mile across the across the creek, as we say, and about the last count I had was about 7,500 people who work for NASA or subcontractors live in our district. So why can't we get the shuttle? Why did President Obama send the shuttle to New York and we got a mock-up? So we had that act. Pay our correctional officers fairly. I passed that bill, which means that those in Beaumont who are underpaid, because Houston's correctional officers get a lot more money than Beaumont do. I'm saying, look, we ought to have parity there. Again, you've got to get these past the committees and on the floor. I've got Police Officer Protecting Children Act, which is a lot like the John Barnes Act. My Police Officer Protecting Children's Act, Angie, says this. If you're a retired police officer and you want to go to work, we can put you to work protecting school children. 3 good things happen. This is because of my experience with Santa Fe High School. Number 1, you're not going to have to pay income tax on that. The school district's not going to have to pay income tax on that salary, right? So 3 good things happen. The retired police officer, male or female, gets a bump in salary, doesn't pay any more taxes, right? The school doesn't have to outlay any money in matching the taxes, you know what I'm saying, FICA and that kind of stuff, Social Security and whatnot. And also very, very important, the kids get an expert in security guarding them. I can't get it out of committee. Well, why? Maybe because, when somebody works, they ought to pay Social Security into the system. You're saying no. I'm saying, look, yes, I am saying no. This is about schools and kids' safety and stuff like that, and our first responders. In my opinion, this is a win-win-win. We're still working on that.
Well, and you think that if you get the parents involved and you're saying it's, child safety, it's your school
Absolutely.
safety.
You betcha. So the 2 bills that I have passed out of committee are the Next Generation Pipelines R&D Act, where we want to make sure we get more and more pipelines where we can sell more and more energy. Because you went through Winter Storm Uri in February of 21, and I don't mean to pry, but did you lose power?
I did.
We did too, although since I sold my air conditioning company, I had a backup generator in my garage that I fired it up with gasoline, and so we kept our house on.
I did have a gas fireplace, though.
Yeah, absolutely. We do too. But here's the thing. I have guaranteed to the Gulf Coast of Texas that we won't have any more hurricanes. I'm personally guaranteeing that. You know how?
How are you going to guarantee that, Randy?
I bought a whole house generator for $18,000, and I'll probably never have another hurricane now.
Oh, exactly.
And
now
so
that you're ready.
Think about it. I bought it 2 years ago. So this past year, did we have a hurricane?
We did not. Maybe that's good.
I rest my case.
I appreciate that. Thank you so much.
So those are the things that I worked for, and make sure that Texas is first and foremost for energy and less taxes. You know this. We don't have an income tax in Texas, and blah blah blah. Mine is to bring Texans to the forefront and hope that the rest of the country would be just as solid in their beliefs in God and in the country and doing the right things.
So we're so over, but we're not a live show, so what's it matter?
Sure.
One thing that we did skip over that I wanted to say is obviously we recently had a very controversial shutdown of the government. My connection to the airline. So I saw many TSA agents and air traffic controllers, just to name a few, going without pay with no promise of reimbursement. So many people feel it should be the legislators that go without pay instead of the jobs. They also say they should just lock y'all in a room until you fight it out and you get it done, and then we'll let you come out. What actually can be done? What insight can give us on how Congress can handle these budget issues without just blaming the other side?
Right.
What concrete changes could be made in this process?
Well, number one, let me answer the legislators without pay. I instructed my staff to get a hold of the Capitol administration and say, look, hold my paychecks. Now think about this, Angie. That was the longest shutdown in American history, 44 or 45 days. I forget one of the two. And I told my friends across the aisle, because it was the senators over in the Senate, they weren't going to budge. They were not going to budge. Well, I didn't really talk to them, but I'm talking to my Democrat, and I'm very cordial with my Democrat friends. I mean, they know that I love humor and that I'm always quick with a one-liner to make them smile. You know what I'm saying? There's a very serious side of me, too, in case you can't tell. But I said to them, I said, look, y'all need to realize, you need to tell your friends over in the state, y'all need to realize something. Even Noah was only on the ark 40 days and 40 nights. So give it up,
That's
you
true.
know. And that's the thing we've got to do. But I mean, let's face it. We're all big boys and girls here. The left hates Donald Trump and what he stands for, and whatever he's going to try to do, and that the Republicans are going to fight for. And you know, we have a one-person majority right now. We have a one-person majority right now, and that's the old famous saying. Was it Ben Franklin when they were putting together the Constitution or the Declaration of Independence or both? Said we need to all hang together or we'll hang separately. You know. And I'm saying, look, guys, we've got to hang together. We've got to do things for the American public, and the Senate has to help. The fact that they've got the 60, vote threshold doesn't help. You got 51, was it 51 or 52 Republicans and the rest Democrats? You know, thankfully over in the House, we're just a regular majority. So we've got to stop that. We've got to make sure we do stay there. And I stayed when was it the first shutdown under Obama? I stayed there, and Brenda Gale was in Friendswood, and she stayed here that weekend, and was it a second weekend too? But I stayed up there through a couple of times. I did, yeah.
But I think that people are thinking that y'all shouldn't even be able to come out of session. You
Yeah.
just like sleep there
Yeah.
until you need to do an old fashioned filibustering.
There on the floor, yeah, yeah.
Stand there on the floor, lock you
Well,
in until y'all. It's like go away to sleepaway camp when you all come away
Right.
friends. Maybe we could just not be us against them kind of society
Well,
anymore.
that's the problem. That's the problem it's gotten to. And here's the other thing too. Majority, growing up, if you took government class or anything, you heard this phrase: rule by majority. 50% plus one, right? Well, look, that means the minority, whether it's Republicans or Democrats, have to be willing to go along with what the majority said. You know what I'm saying? You have to be. I'm always cordial. You'll never hear me cuss one of my colleagues. Not that I hadn't thought about it. No. Whether they're Republican or Democrat, But I'm saying, look, come on, y'all. We got to work on this together. And so there's some things that you look at these people and you just shake their heads, and I think, what are they thinking?
Does it always have to be right up until the last second that things are being passed? Can we not do it a little in advance and give us some leeway?
12 appropriation bills, and we'd like to get them all done. And speaking about appropriation bills, I bring money home to dredge out the ship channel, the Galveston ship channel, which is the Houston ship channel. Make sure pipelines are part of that process. Texas is the #1 state for pipelines. So we always want to make sure that we can get that done. So you'd like to get it done. The fiscal year ends, to your question, September the 30th. We've got 12 appropriation bills that go through the appropriate or the requisite committee. And you'd like to get those done, but if you don't get the Democrats and Republicans to get together and they can't come to grips with a bill that puts on the floor, and it gets closer and closer and closer, right to the end of the August, September 30th is in. That's it. That's the end of the fiscal year. Then we're in a heck of a mess. We've got to do something. And I've been there 13 years, and I've said, you know what? They've got to change that. We've got to work together. We've got to get those bills passed. But all that in the backdrop, don't forget, we have a $37 trillion with the T dollar deficit. We can't keep spending money. A friend of mine says, well, that's like spending money like a drunken sailors. I said, don't say that. You're going to give sailors a bad name. They're not as bad as we are, So,
Y'all, you don't want them to be associated with Congress?
yeah.
Okay, well, I mean, we should stop. Let me just I was going to ask you a leader, past or present, that you admire, but you've already told us
Sure.
that Reagan and Lincoln.
Right.
What do you think the biggest misconception about you is?
The biggest misconception about me, maybe that I'm too hard-laced, maybe that I'm too rough on people that don't share in my belief in the Lord Jesus Christ. There's some people who think I'm goofy because I do. You call them atheists or whatever, non-believers, call them whatever you want to call them. That I'm in Trump's back pocket just because I appreciate his stand. Like I said, I didn't read his book, but he's done a lot of good. If you watch around the world, what's happening, how many countries are actually caving, what he's doing with tariffs is pretty remarkable. We want them to end as much as possible, but we want to bring manufacturing back into the United States. You know what I'm saying? All this stuff that's put overseas, and all these, whether it's China, whether it's Taiwan. I mean, I can go right down the list.
Yeah.
Philippines, whether it's Vietnam, whoever it might be. We need to have those jobs in America, and we need to have the high schools teaching that, the community colleges teaching that, colleges teaching that, and so that the things that we're doing right now are the things we want to do. People think maybe I don't care about them or their class, or but I really do have America's best interest at heart.
So, what do you are we doing something to prepare our kids to be workers that could work in factories and blue collar jobs?
That's a good question, because I tell people this all the time in the Gulf Coast of Texas. Kids can get out of high school with maybe some remedial training after that, and they can actually literally get a job if they keep their nose clean, no drug record, no alcohol, no DWIs, that kind of stuff. They can literally get a job in some of these refineries making $70,000, $80,000 a year with all the benefits, 401k and health insurance covered, and retirement and all that stuff. If they would do, and if they want to do overtime, they could be making $80,000, $90,000 a year. Now, coming out of a high school, 18, 19-year-old kid, it ain't a bad deal.
Yeah. And it goes up from there.
And it goes up from there. It sure does.
So, what's the best advice you've ever received?
Think twice before running for Congress.
But you did not heed that advice.
The best advice that I've ever, never spit into the wind. There's actually a different term they use than spit. I'll leave it at that. Yeah.
All right. So the last question I just want to ask you is, why should voters put you on their A-list for this election?
Right. Well, because I'm from here. I'm a family guy. I grew up here. Brenda Gill grew up 90 miles away, but she got here quick as she could. She was looking for me, I'm sure. We've got 3 kids, 8 grandkids, 2 great-granddaughters. I'm a working guy. I had owned the air conditioning company for 35 years. Started from scratch, built it from the ground up. Boy, I know what hard work is. I know that money doesn't grow on trees, I know there's going to be times when, as my wife will tell you, I have the perfect right to be wrong. So I'm easygoing. I love this country. I love Texas. I love Jesus Christ. And I just think that if you're going to run for something like this, you ought to take into account all of those factors. Where did you grow up? What's your background? Are you willing to take the hard votes? Are you willing to have people take, for lack of a better term, pot shots at you? I had a guy stand up. We don't do town halls because the Capitol Police has advised us now with people shooting, that you don't want to be out there because you never know when one guy shows up with a pistol or a rifle, and you can be really in a bad way. And so I had the last one I had several years ago. The guy in the back stood up and said, "Weber, I wouldn't vote for you if you were St. Peter." I just looked at him and I said, "Buddy, if I was St. Peter, you wouldn't be in my district. So you better have a good sense of humor."
And we always appreciate that here. I thank you for being here. I thank you for representing us. I will tell people, I know you personally, and you take calls. Yeah. You will answer the call if someone has a question. If they have a problem, they can come to you.
Yes, ma'am.
So I hope that they keep you in Congress, and if they replace you, it better be with somebody who will take my phone call.
I don't think Brenda Gill's going to run.
But, well, of course, she would be a better candidate.
Yeah.
So thank you. We've covered where Congressman Weber stands, how he sees his record, and what he believes the future holds. Whether you agree or disagree, or fall somewhere in between, the most important voice in the process is yours. I'm Angie Mertens, and this has been the A-List. Democracy isn't a spectator sport. It's about listening, questioning, and deciding what leadership looks like for you and for your community. Stay informed, stay engaged, and most importantly, make your choice count at the polls. This election primaries will be February 17th to the 27th, with Election Day on March 3rd. Thank you for watching. I'll see you next time.